Hey everybody, today we are going to be taking a look at a Gyarados deck from the 2010 format. But before I jump into the video, I just wanted to say that I've had an absolute blast making YouTube videos for the last 4 months. And it's been awesome to see all the positive feedback, see the channel grow. Yesterday we just passed 200 subscribers, which is awesome. And I'm excited for the future to see where I can grow the channel, what content I can put out there, and hopefully keep earning those subscribers and that positive feedback that I've received so far. All of that being said, I'm very knowledgeable about Pokemon, these older formats. This is what I grew up. This is what I enjoy. This is what I play. I can deck build decks. I can play decks. The whole YouTube thing has been very, very new to me. And I've had a ton of help getting this off the channel. This channel off the ground. Snowpoint Cast helped me set up my mic settings, gave me a lot of tips with YouTube, different do's and don'ts, stuff like that. I've gotten a ton of feedback from a lot of you about what you enjoy seeing, what you don't enjoy seeing, how to improve the channel on stuff. And one of the things that came up a lot was for people that are not familiar with older formats, to show bigger versions of the card or to enlarge them or put them to the side, and just so it's easier to see and read those and talk about those cards. That being said, for me, there was a lot of editing challenges there. But I had somebody that followed the channel reach out to me. His name is Jake Gearhart, and he basically is a computer programmer, and he does a lot of music composing. But he basically created a program that I can put cards into, or anybody can put cards into, and then not only will that show the deck list like Proxy Croak would, but it also allows you to click on the card and make it bigger so it's easier to talk about stuff like that. For somebody like me trying to do videos, it is unbelievably easier than trying to go through and edit the cards in along the side. He's got it set up, I think, for basically every card created. So his Twitter is down here in the bottom of the screen here, and then I'm going to go ahead in the description link the site and then the Twitter account. So I guess give me some feedback on this if you like this better. For me, it seems it's a lot easier editing wise, and a lot easier to talk about cards. But just give some feedback if you like this new format versus, say, the Proxy Croak format on things. So today, let's go and just jump into the deck here. And I've talked a little bit about 2010, and 2010 it's a very interesting format, and sometimes a very difficult format to deck build in, because so much of the format there's some very hard gatekeepers in the format. And when I say gatekeepers, what I mean is there's cards in the format that make it very hard for other cards to exist or other decks to exist. When you're trying to deck build the 2010 format, you've always got to keep Gardevoir in mind. You always have to keep Dusknoir in mind. You always have to keep Double Colorless Energy in mind with Garchomp level X and things like this. So there's a lot of challenges to deck building. The other thing I'm going to say is in 2010, I find like a lot of formats like 2004, which we've covered a lot on the channel, you will find that there's not a whole lot of, if there's a matchup you're really concerned about, yeah, maybe you tech something in or something like this or that. But for the most part, regardless of the matchups you're expecting, you're not going to see a bunch of major changes in deck lists. 2010, I think, is very different from the standpoint that you can very heavily tech for certain decks or certain things that you're expecting to be popular. This is incredibly important if you want to be successful in a metagame for stuff. And I think the other thing about 2010 is it's competitive. I feel like the decks have been flushed out very heavily, but I don't think you see as much of a there hasn't been as many high-profile tournaments to really flush out a metagame. The one large 2010 tournament they did in Nationals basically worked out the way that I thought it would, where you have Gardevoir basically winning the event, and I think the top 8 was 3 Gardevoirs, 3 Gyarados. I think it was 3 Gardevoirs, 2 Gyaradoses, 2 Gengars. There was a Steelix Prime in there. So it was a pretty standard meta. I wrote an article on it. You can check that article out on 6 Prizes. But essentially, it was a pretty standard what I thought. Some of the smaller online tournaments I've seen are a little bit... I don't think they accurately reflect the meta. There's decks doing well and decks winning and deck lists that are winning that I can't imagine ever doing as well in a larger tournament. That being said, though, maybe the way you approach a smaller tournament with a certain level of competitiveness is going to be vastly different than you would approach a much larger tournament, such as the one they had at Nationals, which I think had 60 or 70 players in it. So that being said, though, I think undisputably the best deck in the 2010 format is going to be Gardevoir by a mile. I think Gardevoir is the absolute best deck in the format by a large margin. People seem to always be on this Dialga train, but if Dialga really became as popular as people think it is good, you Tekken him a champ, and then that matchup becomes near auto win as well. So just my 2 cents on it. That being said, though, I put out an incredibly large article on the 2010 format, I think back in 2014, 2015, on 6 Prizes, and I'll link that in this description as well. And I put a Gyarados deck in there that I think is, quote-unquote, the best variation of Gyarados for a very standard meta. The deck has basically just become kind of the gold standard for Gyarados, and you see basically most of the Gyarados lists nowadays are within a few cards of that. I am not going to take all the credit for that. I think that was based very heavily on the second place Worlds finisher and the seniors, who I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will have my editing staff put that name in there so I can make sure we give credit for that. That being said, though, one of the innovations that I saw that I really, really, really liked was from that 2010 tournament. There was a Gyarados player, I believe her name was Amy Featherstone, who played a really unique version of Gyarados that played plus power and dark energy. And the idea was you'd have plus powers that would help considerably in the Gardevoir matchup, and then the dark energy could be very good to getting first turn wins. It's also very good against anything Gengar related, stuff like that. That being said, Gyarados is obviously a very, very tight deck and a very, very, very tight list. Going along with this, though, I think the dark energy was probably overkill. I don't think that's needed. But I do feel, I'm not hating on the dark energy. I don't think the dark energy is bad. I just don't think it's worth devoting 4 spots in the deck to play dark energy. That being said, though, I do think the plus power is a near essential in this format if going into any sort of competitive 2010 tournament, because it's about your only chance against Gardevoir. I won't say your only chance, but the matchup I think is considerably more favorable with Gardevoir. In the Gardevoir matchup, they relied very heavily on you maxing out at 110 damage, and then you're constantly swapping between Gardevoirs, healing that off, and hopefully just eventually getting to the point where your opponent misses a Gyarados. If your opponent has a Gardevoir with an expert belt on it, they have 130 HP. If you have a Gyarados with an expert belt, you're hitting for 110. You find 2 out of your 4 plus powers, and you knock out a Gardevoir. If you can do that even just once, that usually breaks their link enough where you can win the game from there. That being said, though, too, this version of Gyarados is also considerably cheaper. If somebody wants to build this deck in real life, you don't need to have, you don't have to buy the Luxury Level X or the Poketurns or anything like that. It actually drops the price of the deck by, I think, well over $100. So I'm going to say I think the Poketurn Crobat version, Luxury Level X version of the deck is a stronger version of the deck, but it is considerably weaker playing against Gardevoir. Like, your Gardevoir matchup, I think, literally swings by probably 30 or 40% playing the plus powers. And if you're going into a big competitive 2010 tournament where Gardevoir is probably going to be the number 1 played deck in the format, because it is the number 1 deck in the format, I think you have to play this variation of Gyarados. So jumping into the list here, I guess the overall concept, and we're 9 minutes into the video, we're actually going to start talking about the deck list. But the main concept of Gyarados is that Gyarados does 30 damage for each Magikarp in your discard pile. You basically evolve 1 Magikarp into Gyarados, and then you pitch the other 3. So Tail Revenge is hitting for 90. You use a combination of Expert Belt and then Plus Power to hit those magic numbers to get knockouts. And then as soon as that Gyarados goes down, you basically use a combination of Time Space Distortion and Broken Time Space to play down the Gyarados in the exact same turn and attack again. It's an incredibly, incredibly strong deck. It's a very frustrating to play against, and it's incredibly consistent. All of these are major, major pluses for playing Gyarados. So, starting off here, the deck, since the deck is not designed to do, go super aggressive super early. It can with the right hands, but you're not trying to do a turn 190. You basically are settling. You set up the first couple turns of the game, and then basically every single turn after that should just be knockout, 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 knockout. And you're just going to straight steamroll your opponent. Starting off here, we play 4 copies of the Overeager Sableye. If you open Sableye, you open Sableye, you roll like normal, or you flip a coin, whatever you want to do to see who starts the game. And then you flip over. If you have Sableye, you automatically go first. If your opponent has Sableye, it's whoever won the coin flip. And then Impersonate does, you search your deck for a supporter, and then you play it. Basically, it just gives you a free first turn supporter. It costs no energy to do, so you don't need to find an energy card or anything like that, which is also awesome because it lets us get away with a very, very, very low energy lineup in the deck. Overconfident does 10 damage, and then if the defending opponent has fewer remaining HP than Sableye, it does 40 damage instead. So this is very strong against, say, like Ghastly, for example, where you would automatically knock it out, Unknown Q. Stuff like that, you'd automatically win on the first turn of the game if you had Sableye and Dark Energy. This is a little bit harder to pull off. Like I said, I don't think it's worth playing the spots for the Dark Energy in the deck. I think it's better just to have a strong, consistent Gyarados deck, and that's going to win you more games in the long run. But Overconfident is an incredibly strong attack, and it's caused more than a few headaches by players over the course of the years. You can use Overconfident in combination with damage modifying cards like Expert Belt to give Sableye 80 HP plus the 20 extra damage on the attack. So basically with an Expert Belt, you're automatically hitting for, it'd be, I think, 70 with a Dark Energy. 10, you're going to have more HP, so that's going to be, 40, Expert Belt 60, Dark Energy is going to be 70, yeah. But the main idea of the deck is usually we're just going to impersonate. Turn 1, we're going to get a Pokemon Collector, and that's just going to start getting us our Magikarps. Next up, we play 4 copies of Magikarp. We have to have it in the deck. Sea Spray is just honestly going to be the best Magikarp for the deck. You don't want to open Magikarp, but if you do, trying to draw cards without actually investing energy in it is going to be your best bet for an attack. 30 HP and weakness to Lightning. It's one of the rough things about the 2010 format is if you open with this and nothing else, there's a solid chance you're going to lose on the first turn of the game. That's why we do play a lot of other basics in the deck to really try to mitigate the chances of us opening with a lone Magikarp. 3 copies of Gyarados. Even though Gyarados has 3 attacks, the only one we care about is going to be Tail Revenge. This is going to be the main attack of the deck. And the really cool thing, and I'm going to note it really quickly here, is the deck was actually created by a French player that he won French Nationals with in 2009, and everybody just kind of, wrote it off as some random guy got lucky. I believe his name was Fabien Garner, and he just got lucky, no big deal. Nobody really took the deck seriously. Nobody even really looked into the deck. And then he took it to Worlds and ended up getting top 8 at Worlds, and he got 3 tails on Super Scoop Up flips against Steven Sylvester. Otherwise, he would have made the top 4 at Worlds that year. And that deck list, I think that he played has a lot of room to grow as well. But he was also the only player playing it, created it himself, or him and his team created it. And just what they were able to accomplish, I think, is so awesome just to see basically a card that everybody just kind of wrote off, and then they take it to be an absolute powerhouse of the format. Unbelievably awesome rogue deck. Probably one of the greatest rogue decks ever created, because it just became an absolute meta for the next 2 years. Other than that, the fighting resistance doesn't come in a whole lot. The lightning weakness plus 30 does matter. You get into some interesting situations with Luxchomp where they can use Expert Belt and Luxray level X along with Lucario GL. So the lightning weakness unfortunately does matter, but other than that, not a whole lot to note down there. Next up, we run 2 Crobat Gs. Even though we are not playing the Poketurn engine and we are playing the Plus Power engine, Crobat G is still a must-play in the deck for a couple of different reasons. One, it is a searchable damage counter, and against a deck that is not going to be power locking us, which is the main reason we got to go with the Plus Powers, because against Gardevoir, they're going to be Psychic Locking, turning our powers off. Flash Bite is not going to work. It is a searchable 10 damage. This is going to be very strong in other matchups like Steelix, Gengar, basically any non-Gardevoir deck in the format. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly strong against. On top of that, it also gives us free retreat. We need a free retreater in the deck to promote. So if Gyarados gets knocked out, we've got to bring up something with free retreat, like a Crobat, while we drop the Gyarados back down on the bench. So we've got to do that. I do play 2 copies of it for a couple of different reasons. One, having that free retreat is so absolutely essential. We do need to make sure we don't prize it. And then 2, it is such a strong opener. Behind Sableye, it is probably the best opener in the deck because we can open with it and then free retreat into whatever we need to. It's just such an amazing card. 2 copies of Uxie. It's a draw card, grab it off collector. It is just, once again, incredibly strong. Even though I am a little bit worried about power locking and how common that is in this format, we definitely still want to play 2 Uxies. It's very strong against SP. In case they do open Power Spray, you can collector for both copies of Uxie, making sure you are going to get that draw off. One-time walk is Zelf. You cannot prize Magikarps. If you prize a Magikarp and against any deck, your damage output goes from 90 down to 60. You've got to make sure you have those Magikarps. Against SP decks, there is a little bit of strategy to baiting out their power sprays and a little bit of in-depth psychology there too. But basically, you got to discover, especially on your first look through the deck, if you prized a Magikarp, and you got to be able to get that out as quickly as possible. Downer Material is Zelf. This is unbelievably strong card against any sort of SP decks. Any basic Pokemon takes 1 more energy to attack. It's so simple to put that. It's just so simple to incorporate that into this deck. When we're already playing Uxie, we're already playing Mesprit, just throwing in the 1 copy of Zelf. If we're playing against an SP deck, having to have that extra energy to attack sets them behind so much. It is so absolutely detrimental to SP decks. And if they target that down, that means they're going for our Zelf. They're going for these single prize attackers, putting in a lot of effort to get it, and they're not actually doing anything to deal with our Gyaradoses. This alone swings your SP matchup probably 30% plus. It is that good. 1 copy of Mesprit. Mesprit, basically, when you play it down, you use Psychic Bind. Your opponent can't use powers on the next turn. In a lot of matchups, you want to time this really, 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 really well, where you basically are going to take a key knockout, and then that Psychic Bind is going to stop your opponent from being able to get a threat down on the following turn. I've actually considered running 2 in the deck. It is so strong, but just bench space alone, you're just going to stick with the 1 copy here. Funny enough on this, too, I remember I was walking down to, for round 1 of Worlds in 2009, and a player was missing 1 copy of Mesprit, ended up paying $20 for the card. Well, it was online for like $1 at the time, just because of how broken that was and how much he absolutely had to have that for his deck for Worlds that year. 1 Combi. Now, this is actually a Kyle Puka Sukovic tech. And essentially what it is a strategy that Dialga can use is they can basically try to just deafen the first Gyarados to a knockout, using other tricks as well. But basically they'll hit Gyarados, say they'll Dragon Rush it, and then they'll bring up Dialga Expert Belt and then deafen for the knockout. And basically, if they're deafening, you can't use time-space distortion. So what Kyle came up with is he's going to use this combi to put a Magikarp on the bench and then evolve into Gyarados. And the general strategy against Dialga, and you can do a couple different things based on the setup or the start, but essentially the first Gyarados, you can basically put 2 Magikarps in the discard pile. The first one is just going to hit for 60. You can modify that if you have an Expert Belt on there, it's going to be 80. You just settle for those 2 hit knockouts. The second Gyarados is going to have 3 Magikarps in the discard pile at this point because the first Gyarados got knocked out. That one's going to be swinging for 90. And then you can use Combi to get a 3rd Gyarados out. So essentially, even against a Death and Lock, you can stream 3 Gyaradoses. And if they're maxing out at 10 or 30 damage a turn, that's not going to win them the game. That first Gyarados at 60, that's completely optional. That's up to you depending on how the matchup plays out. But that was a very common strategy back in the day. The Combi Tech from Kyle was absolutely key. It was a great addition. Very easily searchable off Pokemon Collector, but very, very, very cool tech. Regice basically is just another way for you to dump Magikarps into the discard pile. It also acts as a way to get Spirit Tombs or Mr. Mimes out of the active spot, giving you a little bit more freedom with the deck. You can also, basically if your opponent tries to send something up to sacrifice it, you can also Regi move to just get it out of the active spot and try to hit something a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Now, the 3 retreat cost does hurt. You got to be very careful against SP decks. The main strategy SP will use is they will try to repeatedly drag up the Regice and then snipe around it with Garchomp level X. The deck does play a couple ways to combat this. We'll talk to when we get there, but Regice is just a searchable way to discard those Magikarps, and it has some good interactions with cards that are problematic for you in the format. One Unknown Q. Unknown Q is another card that I really miss. It was outstanding. Basically, you attach it as a tool to one of your Pokemon, and it reduces the retreat cost by 1. The general idea is that this will give Sableye free retreat, so when you're done impersonating, you can retreat back to that first Gyarados. You can also, if you unfortunate enough to open with like a Magikarp or a Uxie, Azelf, or Misprit, you can basically get it out of the active spot and retreat into a Sableye. This is very strong off of Pokemon Collector. You can go Collector for, say, let's say if we open Uxie, you go Collector for Sableye, Unknown Q, Magikarp, and then you Unknown Q the Uxie for retreat back to the Sableye, and then you can impersonate from there for whatever you need. So all around, very, very strong. It is a basic Pokemon, and it is 30 HP. You need to be very careful with this, because we do have 5 30 HP openers in the deck. Not very excited about that, but like I said, we do run enough basics to offset that enough to feel comfortable with it. So, for Pokemon Collector, absolutely essential for the deck. Got to be able to grab those Magikarps. There's really no point in running Roseanne's Research in this deck, as we do not play any sort of basic energy. Just got to stick with that Collector. 4 Felicity's Drawing. Another way for us to easily pitch those Magikarps, ideally for us, is we're either gonna Collector or impersonate for a 3 Magikarps, and then we can either Collector or we can either Felicities or impersonate a Felicities on the following turn to put 2 of them right into the discard pile. Very, very strong, very good draw card. I think one of the things in 2010 is a lot of decks just do not run straight draw like this, just like a straight draw 3, straight draw 4. And Felicities is really, really strong, especially when trying to get out of late game judges and things like that, or finding key tech cards. Especially if you have a Gardevoir or something shutting off powers, Felicity's Drawing is just so incredibly strong. 4 Broken Time Space. Now, you probably don't need 4 Broken Time Space. Very few decks actually play it, but you've got to be able, or play Stadiums, but you have to be able to find it early, and then if your opponent does play Counter Stadium, be able to find a replacement very quickly. Very common strategy for Gardevoir is, as they take a knockout on a Gyarados, they are going to play down to Moonlight Stadium and then judge you to a new hand and try to get you to miss the Broken Time Space in the 4 cards. That's why we do absolutely have to play 4. If they do start clogging the hand, they can be discarded with cards like Felicities or Regice. So absolutely must play 4 there. Time Space Distortion. So this is one of those cards where I think a lot of players play Pokemon Rescue just because it's right there, it's easy, it's consistent, and it's, to be blunt with you, it's cheap. It's like 25 cents. Time Space Distortion, in my opinion, is the superior card. 7 times out of 8, it is going to do the exact same thing or better than Pokemon Rescue. 7 times out of 8. And there's a lot of situations where you do want to get that extra basic back. Maybe that's grabbing an Unknown Q, grabbing an Uxie, a Misprit, and a Zelf, or maybe you just need to grab Magikarp and Gyarados. Time Space Distortion puts you in a situation where you don't actually have to find the next Gyarados, you can get it back. Like you can get back Magikarp and Gyarados with one single Time Space Distortion. I do feel this is superior to just playing Pokemon Rescue, and people are going to say, yes, what if you get 3 tails? 100% that is a risk you are taking, but that is 1 in 8 chance. 7 times out of 8, it is going to be equal to or better than Pokemon Rescue. That being said, though, too, if you are building this deck with real cards, Pokemon Time Space Distortion is not cheap. They are, I think, sitting around $15 right now. And considering the fact that they are printed literally 1 in 3 boxes, I could easily see this card hitting $100+ down the line. It is just so incredibly rare. And usually the chase cards are like, people like pretty cards like Charizard and stuff like that. Even though Time Space Distortion is incredibly rare, being 1 in 3 boxes, it just doesn't have that same, being a trainer card, I don't think gives it the same appeal as, say, a Charizard or some of the other shinies that you see as chase cards. But I digress, and basically Time Space Distortion as a 4-of, in my opinion, is considerably better than Pokemon Rescue, and that's what you should be playing in Gyarados. Next up, for Super Scoop Up. Super Scoop Up, just incredibly strong, and a lot of really versatile. Let's say your opponent comes up, let's say we're playing against Gardevoir, they Psychic Lock a Gyarados for 80 damage. Okay, pretty standard play. Super Scoop Up heads, pick up the Gyarados, promote the Crobat, Magikarp, Broken Time Space, Gyarados, put up the Gyarados, attach our Expert Belt again if we had it, smack him for 110. It basically completely eliminates the entire last turn of damage your opponent did. Even at a 50-50 shot, that is huge. Now, the versatility point of it also comes in where you can use it to pick up and recycle an Uxie, a Misprit, do another Time Walk with a Zelf. Let's say your opponent's being very clever and trying to drag Regice into the active spot, you can just completely take it off the board. It just has so much versatility as a normal item card. It's not taking your supporter spot or anything like that. It's just a normal item card. It is so incredibly strong. 4 copies of Plus Power. Now, once again, Plus Power is, we talked about it a lot. It's mainly for the Gardevoir matchup. You string 2 Plus Powers together. You're going to knock out a Belted Gardevoir with the Belted Gyarados. You need that in the Gardevoir matchup. In non-Gardevoir matchups, it still adds 10 damage. It's not as, how do I want to say it? It's not as, Crobat has a lot more utility. There's things like you can Flash Bite, let's say, an opposing Magikarp as a knockout. You can knock out stuff on the bench if the damage is right, stuff like that. So Crobat has a lot more flexibility, but Plus Power being a trainer card that you can play under Power Lock is going to be key for that Gardevoir matchup. 2010 in particular, do not underestimate Gardevoir. It is by far the best deck in the format. I'm going to tell you, if you're going to any sort of competitive tournament and you know Gardevoir is going to be played, you're going to want to play the Plus Power version of the deck. It is much stronger in that matchup than the Poketurn version of the deck. Along with that, Plus Power is not bad in other matchups. If you're playing against, let's say, a Dialga deck and you're 10 damage shy or 20 damage shy from knocking out a Dialga level X, Plus Power is still going to get you there, and in some cases it might even be stronger in that situation because they can't Power Spray the Crobat. So once again, 100% I'm all on board. You got to play Plus Power in the deck. 3 Expert Belts. Everybody watching at home, stop playing 2 Expert Belts in your 2010 decks. Just stop doing it. Just play the 3rd Expert Belt every single time. Every time. I think out of like the 15 or 16 2010 decks I have built, I think there is one deck, I think maybe the Magnezone deck played 2 Expert Belts just for space and the fact that it was never going to get knocked out. Or Magnezone should not be getting knocked out, but stop playing 2 Expert Belts in decks, especially in a very power locking heavy format. You need to be able to continuously find those Expert Belts and find them consistently. Not only is that going to make Gyarados harder to knock out, giving you more value out of cards like Super Scoop Up, stuff like that, your damage output, you need that Expert Belt. That extra 20 damage is absolutely huge in this format. Play 3. 4 is overkill. 2 is not enough. You need to play 3. You need to find the card early. You need to find it often. 3 Pokemon Reversal. This is going to replace the Luxray line in the deck. 1, it's not worth playing 1/1 Luxray if we're not playing the Poketurns. 2, once again, under power locking, Luxray is not going to get you there. This is another great anti-Gardevoir tech. You are going to be able to drag something up and knock it out, whether that be a Claydol, a Nidoqueen, which would be completely devastating to them, a bench Gardevoir they're trying to heal off. Pokemon Reversal is, in most matchups, is going to equal at least 1 prize, and a lot of the time 2 prizes. It's a normal item card. We're playing 3 copies of it, even on a coin flip. Card is incredibly strong. I'm liking Pokemon Reversal in the deck the more I'm testing it. 2 Cynthia's Feelings. I do want to note that I did drop the Judge, and one of the main combos in the deck was to go Misfit Judge, put your opponent at a low hand size, try to put them off that next big threat. This deck, as you can tell and we've talked about, is far more designed to play in a very Gardevoir heavy format. So something like Judge Misfit is probably going to be stronger against a deck like, say, Gengar, for example. The Cynthia's Feelings is going to be very good in a lot of disruptive decks. So against power locking decks like Gardevoir, it's also very good in, let's say, the SP matchup, stuff like that. I guess so is a Judge Misfit combo, but Cynthia's Feelings is so strong. I could see a lot of arguments to play 3 Cynthias or even 4 Cynthias in this deck. Just make sure you're continuously streaming those Gyaradoses and you're finding those tech plus powers and Pokemon reversals when you need it. I love Cynthia's Feelings in here. I'm playing at least 2 copies. Like I said, I wouldn't hate a 3rd or even a 4th copy of it. And I could also see the deck playing a Judge. I think going heavy Judge is not the right call on Gyarados. It's a little counterintuitive, but I like Cynthia's Feelings in the deck. I think Judge is a solid card as well. 2 BB Search, just got to make sure that we're finding those Gyaradoses. BB Search also works under Spirit Tomb, so just gives you a little bit of versatility there as well. 1 copy of Luxury Ball, just basically a normal trainer card, or normal item card. Search your deck for any Pokemon. We don't play any level X's, so there really is no exclusion for me. It can grab anything in the deck. Very, very strong card. 1 copy of VS Seeker. You don't see a ton of this in the format. The reason that VS Seeker, I think, is stronger in this deck is because you play Sableye. And one of the reasons it's weaker in other decks is because basically you have to have the supporter before VS Seeker is live. And if you, let's say, are playing Gardevoir and you open VS Seeker, it's a very, very dead card. Now, against a deck that'll play Sableye, and you're going to be impersonating the first 1, 2, 3 turns of the game, you are going to make sure that VS Seeker is going to become a live card on turn 1. And with such a vast supporter lineup that we do play, Pokemon Collector, Felicity's Drawing, Cynthia's Feelings, BB's Search, that VS Seeker is just going to be so much value in this deck and gives you so many options compared to other decks in the format. Lastly, the energy lineup here, we are going to be playing 2 copies of Warp Energy. This is to, 1, get out of any sort of special conditions, any sort of locks, anything like that. Also, if our opponent is trying to be cute and drag up something like, let's say, a Regice or something like that, that's going to let us get it out of the active spot. Combo this with Super Scoop Up. Say, for example, they drag up a Regice, we warp it back. They drag up Regice again, we Super Scoop Up. Not only do we have the Regice, but we also have the Warp Energy back as well. Very, very strong. I would like a 3rd copy in the deck. I did cut a Warp Energy out of here for a spot, but I like it. I think 2 is okay, but I would love to have 3 in the deck. Cyclone Energy forces your opponent to switch. Once again, this gives us a little bit of playability. The stuff like Sableye we went out of the active spot. Mr. Mime can also be incredibly annoying for the deck to play against, so it gives you a few different options to play around those cards. I considered just dropping this for a 3rd Warp Energy, and while I think that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable, I do think Cyclone Energy is good enough to play. I would like to, as I said, play a 3-1, but a 2-1 is going to be alright for right now in the deck. I would also like a 4th Pokemon Reversal, but that also got cut just for room in the deck. Despite being 60 cards and playing a very low energy lineup, the deck can get very, very difficult to play. So the deck list can get very, very tight on things. So that being said, though, this video is already a little bit longer than I was planning on it being, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found this content helpful, and hopefully the new program that Jake designed is going to be a little bit easier for content creators to show deck lists and make cards bigger and talk about cards like that. So by all means, give me some feedback down below on that. And on top of that, make sure you check out his program, check out his Twitter account. I'll make sure both are linked down below. But once again, huge thanks to Jake for basically sharing this program with me and giving me the okay to do this deck profile on it. So until then, I hope to see you in the next video.